not increasing capacity of the system. The main pumping capacity would be very near the same. The towers provide the redundancy for the operation and maintenance of the system.
I guess the only consideration would be the French Lane loop main, which is also a phase 2 project. The size of that pipe, which I think was sized, it's not only for redundancy, but it's sized for possibly additional capacity in the future.
Right. We did look at the Cooper Heartland, that 10th district a little bit. Right now, it is sized to maintain current existing capacity to Southside customers and IPC. But we're not really looking at a major increase.
We're looking at zero increase for IPC.
Right. Currently, the system struggles to even get water there. So that's what the water main's all about.
Yes, ma'am.
So if we don't do 7, and in other words, if we don't move forward with the project and 4 and 5 go down, where are we with water?
Probably.
I'll answer that one. It'd be, if it's a quality issue and you lose pressure in your system, it goes below 20 psi, then you have a boil order. You can still use the water, but if you're going to consume it, you need to boil it. The other thing would happen is we
So that would make our electricity and our gas go up if we have to boil our water to use it.
Yeah, we don't. I don't think that's a position that City of Delphi and their water ratepayers want to get to where they have boil order day after day.
I agree.
But Craig,
Add on to that, the school be closed, IBC
Sure. I
be
mean,
closed,
they-
everybody be closed.
that's the safety, the quality issue of it, and just the sheer volume that's not available to all the users is the tough decisions are going to need to be made as who's not going to get water. That you will have an inadequate amount of water for your customers.
One more question. Had we not deferred maintenance on our tanks for the last couple of decades, and had we, kept up with, putting new wells into the system, what do you think our existing water rate would be today? I mean, we wouldn't be looking at rates this low had we been stepping up our maintenance, keeping up with our maintenance. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I mean, to do that true evaluation, we have new storage elements, we have rehab of some existing elements. If we've been able to do rehab of the Armory Road tank in the past, we'd be spending as much as we are now. I still think it would be the recommendation to have a companion tank there because of the difficulty of taking that tank offline and what it does to Southside customers.
Right, I guess my question is, are our rates artificially low now because we haven't been taking care of these things in the past?
They're lower than what they would be if you'd taken care of them,
Right.
yes.
So the fact that our rates are, are so low is in part due to the fact that we haven't been maintaining the system over the years. And so now this, we're faced with, bringing the system up to where it should be. And so we're gonna have to, have rate increases that might have been more gradual over a period of time had these items been taken care of in past decades. Is that a fair assumption?
There's a couple, yes. Private utilities tend to do rate increases every year and a half. Public utilities, they spread those out over a longer period of time.
So if we don't do anything, we're likely to be in a situation where we don't have water. If we do this, our rates are gonna increase. But if we pass this on again to, the next generation, what, we're just, compounding the problem by passing it on and on and on and not dealing with the problem.
For a viable community to either stay as is or grow, you need to have an adequate amount of water. Peerless has said numerous times to the council that time period it's less than 10 years. We're going to be in that position. Whether that's 2 or 10, That's the risk that we have here when it comes to an inadequate supply.
Could I just ask one more thing? Is it, and this is really a rate issue, do communities have the ability to raise their rates and create a pool of money so that, you know, if you do need to fix a tank or something of that sort, you've got a reserve? Is that something that communities could do?
That's an excellent question. As a matter of fact, the SRF program just adopted rules this year to enforce that philosophy. You have to do a asset management plan, which identifies what that ongoing maintenance and replacement schedule for key assets are going to be, and show that you have identified a way to fund that, which will be managing your water rates, where will have to be set at levels to keep the system functioning.
Thank you.
Which is hard to do when we don't even have a soft budget. It would be hard for us to do with that.
Well, they require a formal plan to be completed by the time the last drawdown of this loan program will be. So in the next 18 months, that study is going to be very formalized.
Scott?
I know that you stated that you have not yet had conversation with IPC about their participation. And I was looking at the figures you shared with me a while back, what their current water payment is per month or per year, and what it would increase to with these rates we're looking at tacking on. So basically, they're gonna be looking at paying another $1 million a year for water above and beyond what they're paying. And if they just decide to use they have 4 wells out there, they're not using all 4 of them right now. I know they have mineral issues. But if they decide to go that route, then that leaves another $1 million for the about 1,100 ratepayers that are currently paying aside from them. And I think that, if I remember right, you were cautioned in a letter from Mr. Julian about taking on this project with one sole entity being such a large water user, because that's, in my mind, it's a crapshoot. And I had somebody look at the pamphlet you passed out at a meeting at the canal early on this year, and they said it basically looks like the wells are pumping enough water for the citizenry, but we're looking at continuing, and I don't want to see a business leave. That's a livelihood for many people in our community too. That's not my point. But the concern that we're looking at a multi-million-dollar project on top of 2 bonds that we already have to pay off. And those of us that like it here and want to stay here, we're going to be shouldering a lot of potential weight if things don't go well.
Do you want to speak to that?
The way I would answer that is, in comparison to a typical community this size, having one single customer represent such a large component of your revenue stream for the water utility, not to mention, I presume, the other services that they require, is a challenge, because you are at risk if that customer were to leave. So you have to provide them service. I mean, you can't say thanks for coming here and we don't want you anymore and turn the water off. Even if you wanted to, I'm pretty sure that would not be a process you'd be allowed to go through. Although I've never seen it, so I can't say concretely, but sure doesn't sound right. So you got to do everything you can to try to maintain them as a customer, as well as all the rest of your customers. And you do that by having the water that they need and your customers need delivered them in a reliable fashion at a price that is as reasonable as possible.
And my point is that there's no guarantee, but it probably would have been nice if the conversation had been had with them long before this time, because we're looking at a pretty tight deadline here. We want a decision from our council on Tuesday of next week to start the ball rolling, and we want final action on this by October 1st. That seems pretty tight.
And I'm gonna risk speaking out of turn, but I've probably done it more than once this evening, anyway. But Mayor, it isn't as if there haven't been conversations with IPC. I participated in some of those. I mean, they're aware of the various different projects that were considered and eliminated and potential impact. And I think they gave you feedback that that their expectation was to stay at their current requirement in terms of capacity requirements. And we're aware that that was going to require material investment that the city was going to be making. So I would, again, I'm probably speaking out of turn here because I wasn't part of all those conversations, but I would find it hard for them to say that they're not aware of what's going on here, just like every other.
I was going off of a letter dated August 13th in which the mayor stated that there had been no conversation with them about their participation. So that's what I was going off of.
For this specific iteration of the project, right? I mean, this scope in terms of,
They'll be assessed as a normal ratepayer. There were conversations a year and a half ago where IPC was asking for an expansion increase, and they would bring money to that expansion. What's changed is they haven't asked for the expansion increase, and there is no additional water that they'll be provided, so that may have been what that was alluding to.
Thank you
the
for
difference.
clearing that
They'll
up.
be treated like a regular ratepayer, and their rates will be adjusted, but not make capital contributions to the project because they're not asking for additional capacity.
Okay,
Where a
that
year and
makes
a half
sense.
ago,
Okay,
that
thank you.
dialogue was taking place.
I'll have to look at that later. I do want to get to Patty, but any, Mr. Myers?
I'd like to make the suggestion one more time that myself and a few of us went to talk to Indiana and Purdue University. The hydrologist, geologist, surface water expert, one other one. But they told us that between 100 and 150,000, they would come do a survey and test our area and take all the what-ifs out of all our questions about the sulfites and this and that, instead of poking holes in the ground and having sulfites and spending money and dry wells, and they've got answers to that. And for 100 to 150,000, I think it would be money well spent. To me, it's a no-brainer. They're experts in their field. Instead of spending 13, 14 million and guessing, I guess they're, in my opinion, their opinion would be way more beneficial to council and you making decisions about what's going to happen and spending $14 million for the city. I mean, I know it's a lot of money for an opinion, but
That's something, I mean, I'd defer
You
to
keep
Fearless's
talking about-
judgment.
you keep talking about drilling wells and you got sulfites and you got to do this, you got to spend 200,000 for this. If a bunch of what ifs, they can tell you whether that's going to happen or not. The shelf that they're talking about.
Haven't we
They
paid
mentioned
for
us.
engineering studies?
We have had experts that have done that over the years. I've been here 13 years and I've been in a lot of meetings where we have talked about that type of
You
thing.
talk to engineers.
I mean,
and-
yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
It'd be
it's
easier just
not,
to run the
you
pump.
want to spend it to verify it? I mean, that's another 150,000. That's still, we still have to have water. You're saying 150 are going to tell us we don't need the water. Is that what you're saying?
That's not what I said.
Okay, well, okay, and that's what I'm saying.
I think
You're,
so.
I'm talking about, how many wells have we got with sulfite? Like,
Two.
how many wells have we had to lower?
Have we had to lower?
Yeah.
Lowered well one back in 97, well 3 in 16 or 17.
Okay, just for simple comparison here, just like I said before, they told us that they can go to 400 feet. That's not the problem. That's not our property. That won't drain our wells. The closer they get to our well field, we've got a problem.
Sure.
And they're moving across there every day. You or I probably won't live long enough to see it, but they'll be there. My kids and grandkids will see it.
Right.
And we're gonna spend $14 million, and they're gonna start over with another 14. It does not make sense to me. When we can have a study done and know where to do it.
I think something important to remember is that with wells 4 and 5 on the brink, I mean, we don't know when, but it could happen next year, it could happen
Exactly.
years down the road. That if we were to say, okay, right now, we don't want to do anything more in the current well field, let's do away with well 3, let's say we're not going to do any of that. To maintain the capacity that we have now, we need a minimum of well 7 online, and we would probably want to have the backup of well 3 to have that capacity. Because if we were to go out to the Tays or to the floor, get water from
You
off
just
the
quoted that at
so.
700,000 for that.
Well,
That's right.
and then, I mean, well 3 as well.
You said, they asked about hooking up 7, you said 700,000.
Shot in the middle, yeah.
Okay, okay, you said that, okay.
But then the rest, I mean, so you've got about 50-50 split, more
How
or
long will
less.
that last?
Well 7?
Yeah. To add to it. How long are you secure if you add to well 7?
You said
It's over
70,
35
70
years.
years, right?
A conventional well, yes. Peerless has answered the question on their estimation of what the forecast is due to the quarry operation. Well 7's,
I'm just not,
is it 200 feet deeper than it's required? So they're doing what you said, is drilling the wells 200 feet deeper. To entirely eliminate the risk of the quarry operation, that answer's already been determined. We'll go out west of the Wabash. It's not impacted by the quarry. That answer was 5 to 10 million more. It is the decisions that can be made
5 or 10 million more than what?
than what we're talking about here
You mean
tonight.
to go to the Tays?
Yes, yeah, west of the Wabash and Tays, yes.
Considering what US Aggregates indicated to us, it's probably a lot more than that. It's gonna be significant as far as the expenditure.
More than the number I stated
Yes.
for the,
Well,
to the west.
when US Aggregates goes across Carrollton Road all the way to the Hoosier Heartland, what we were told was to be safe, that if you come from the Tays River, you would best come down and turn left on Milk House Road and go all the way over to Heartland and then come in that way, because they're gonna be mining in different sections of the property that they own.
Sure, we're aware of that.
Plus
So
coming
we
underneath
would
the
get over
Wabash.
and
It's gonna
parallel,
be huge.
parallel to Hoosier Heartland
Mhm.
as close as we could. So that's significantly more. That in a way of certainty for a longer time period of capacity, west of the river in the Tays Valley, is not impacted by the quarry.
Well, why did we drill the wells out there if we're not gonna use them? What was our thought process of going out and spending that money for 20 years down the road we may not use?
To see what the quality and quantity was on that side of the river.
So that,
To see if
go ahead, I'm sorry. Yes.
industrial users came in, IPC, I mean, we had money at the right cost. I mean, they would expand their operations to consume 2 million gallons a day.
So those wells are still,
Test wells.
that we can use, the wells are set up, if we have somebody comes in, we can get out there to get those.
We only have 1 test size production well, we have 3 PTO meters.
Yeah, that's a viable water source for the city. What the challenge has been, the Flora well site, southwest of town, 20 years ago, we drilled out there, prolific amount of water, high level of nitrates. So there's, this quality versus the quantity thing has been a significant challenge for the geologist. People can formulate opinions, but until you drill the well in the ground and pump it out, then you actually know what you have.
And to treat bad water is very expensive.
Sure,
most of
right,
the time.
so in this case, well 7, we're not having to have an iron removal plant, which out west of the Wabash River, it has high iron, we'd have to have a water treatment plant. So that's part of that decision why this location in well 7 and the existing well field is a better answer at this time.
Which costs more, iron or sulfite removal?
Iron. Yeah. Iron's a big plant. You'll see when we get to the construction air stripper, treat that air vapor or iron remove, those big huge filters, 12 foot in diameter, that are in a building, much more expensive to treat iron.
Before we have any other public questions, I'll have Patty speak, and then you can ask questions of her, public family side, or on deal with it.
Sure, I'm Patty Zelmer, partner with Ice Miller, and as John said, I'm the lawyer that's drafting the documents for the transaction. And there's, for each type of bond issue, there's different procedures that you have to go through. So this is a waterworks bond issue, we're in the state of Indiana, pretty much tells me what I have to look at and what we have to do. And in this case, you have two ordinances that the council has to think about. A bond ordinance, and that is the document that basically says we're gonna build the project and we're gonna borrow money to build the project. The second ordinance is the rate ordinance, and that would be to go through the rate adjustment that would be required to produce the revenues that are required to pay the bonds and all the other pots that you want to fill, including a pot to take care of future things, to maintain them, if you will. So those two ordinances have requirements, and in this particular case, the bond ordinance is just your simple local rules, adopted by council, majority vote. Most councils do 2 meetings, some do 3 meetings. I believe we've structured the timetable to build in a special meeting so that we could have a 3-meeting process in place for actual action on the bond ordinance. Those same 3 meetings would be in play for the rate ordinance. That particular ordinance has different requirements in place because you are adjusting rates. There is a public hearing involved. And as a result of the public hearing, there are some notice requirements that come in play with that public hearing. And so the way it's mapped out at the current time, if things do move ahead, we would start the process on September 4th and conclude on October 1. And by October 1, both ordinances would then be adopted, and that would put the city in a position to then participate with the pool program that John talked about. And as John said, the bond ordinance, that's the bigger one. You do not have a rate ordinance in front of you yet because his firm's still working on rates, and so that's not in front of you yet. But the bond ordinance was drafted with what I call maximum flexibility to give you the authority to go to the open market, to go to RD, to go to SRF. It also has maximum flexibility in terms of parameters. And what I mean by that is it doesn't say we're going to issue phase 1 bonds for $7,500,000. It doesn't say we're gonna issue phase 2 for $5 million, whatever. It says you have the authority to issue bonds in 1 or more series. The maximum cost of the project shall not exceed this. The maximum cost or dollar amount, principal amount of the total amount of bonds issued under this ordinance shall not exceed this. So it gives you as much flexibility as possible to be nimble to move into these other programs and take advantage if we should see, for instance, in phase 2, that RD makes sense or that the traditional SRF program becomes an option. We won't have to go back and recreate the wheel with what we've done already. So I'm done with my presentation unless you have questions.
Any questions for Mrs. Elmer?
When you say maximum, that's the maximum that it can cost, what if then engineers come in and say, oh gosh, we have a change order for this and this
Yep,
and this?
yep, that's a good
And that
question.
happens all the time anymore. It doesn't mean when you get
Yeah,
a contract that, oh, this is really what's gonna cost us. Oh, no.
that's a good question. So, because of the structure that's laid out for folks to consider is that we would actually do the first phase based on estimates knowing that the second phase would be that true-up component. We won't have that dialogue in the first phase because bonds would be issued based on estimates. And if we get to phase 2 and bids have come in high on phase 1, there's buffer in phase 2 to account for that. However, if bids come in so high on phase 1, or they come in high on both phases, because you're not gonna do the second bond issue until you have bids, then it would require to come back to council and get an ordinance that approves the increase in the cost. And to authorize a higher maximum project cost and a higher bond issue. And we just went through this in Royal City. We had to go back to the town council and start all over because their numbers were 3 years old. In a situation like this, I do not anticipate that because we have the phase 2 true up and because we are hopefully not gonna wait 3 years before we take bids.
And I guess something that's on the agenda, it was something that, depending on the length of the meeting, and maybe something we'll get to next Tuesday, but different options in terms of procurement. Guaranteed savings contract is one that other Fairman has shared with me to try to minimize change orders or take them out of the picture completely.
It's part of the answer to your question, Carolyn. Once we get through the hearing, if you want us to do it, I can do the 5 to 10 very brief version of that. Or the mayor's direction on that.
See what time it is
Yeah,
and put it from there. If not, maybe Tuesday that we get to it.
What did you indicate on September 4th? What did you say about that September 4th meeting?
That would be the beginning of what I'll call the legal process, where the bond ordinance would be introduced and passed on first reading.
What about,
And
what
at
about the
that
rate?
point, we also anticipate the rate ordinance.
There won't be a rate ordinance.
Not by then.
Not
Not by then, so the special meeting. Okay, all right. Okay.
Now, your figures that you gave for phase 1 and phase 2, and I realize it's plus or minus, but they came in at roughly 14.06 million. Is that why, on some of the paperwork, it indicated that this project could go up, could go as high and up to 14.7 million? That's in there?
14.5 is the maximum amount authorized in the bond ordinance as drafted.
14.475.
That's the maximum borrowing amount, the maximum project's $25,000 more because you'll get $25,000 grant assistance for the asset management program.
So this starts out at 13.5, it could actually go to almost 14.5.
I would say it could go that high without having to come back and reauthorize. So you added the numbers up and then there's roughly $500,000 on top of that.
Yeah.
That's additional buffer.
On page 10 of the Delphi preliminary engineering report, it's got a thing there for estimated population. Where in the world did that come from? Do you know?
No, I haven't seen the application.
It shows going up about 20 people per.
19 people at a time. Yeah,
That's
they're
not
here.
what mine is. Not what mine shows when they do it.
Here.
Every study that's come out in the last 2 years indicates that our population will drop. I just wondered where this one came from that magically shows that we're gonna increase population. I mean, we've done well to average, since 1900, we've done well to average 7 people a year. And all of a sudden, we've got this population explosion. I mean, it's not, huge numbers, but it's huge numbers compared to what everybody else is saying.
Sure. That's based on past census data and the linear interpolation of that population trend that from 1900 to 2010 basically is where that line comes. And then that's interpolated and moves up. That's what SRF wants to see from us in the preliminary engineering report.
That can't be accurate.
It's a forecast, and that's the format that SRF likes it to be done, to show some increase. Time will tell whether that's the true number.
So it's based on the best fit line between 1900
Correct.
data to 2010 data.
Right. They
It
use
shows an
those
increase of 9.364 people a year.
That's correct.
Correct. That's the SRF methodology. Wouldn't tell you it's quick and dirty as opposed to detailed.
I don't think it's accurate.
We'll pass that on to SRF.
We like these numbers. We'll take these numbers, I don't think that's.
Well, I think the 2010, that's where that 8 number switch. They'll probably lower the line.
Is 2018 accurate then, do you think?
It isn't, because it said that our population was 2983
Or 2893.
That's what I thought.
and 2893.
So that jumps up the whole system.
That will be corrected in the final version.
But in the design, we're not designing for growth.
We're not adding
Our
400
financial
people.
plan doesn't anticipate additional customers, so
I think it's important as far as who's gonna pay this back.
understand, that's why those numbers are not in the financial plan.
They're using actual customers.
Customers.
This is a very broad brush population.
I think the reason why that's hard to understand is because in 07, 06, 07, we lost two of the biggest industries in town. We lost the Go Valve. In 08, we lost, Peter Remington went down from the 300 people that they had at that time to a minimum of 10. In 2010, they took and went completely out of business, which laid off the rest of their crew. And that was not the reason I know that, because our county government got into trouble with taxes. We had a downturn, and everybody knows we had what, So I think that we have to realize that if we don't have water, we don't have growth. We don't have housing, we don't have growth. Somewhere along the line, we gotta make a decision of what we really wanna do. I don't like paying higher water bills than anybody else. I don't wanna see us coming back here in another 10 or 15 years now. I don't have to worry about my grandchildren paying it because I won't have any. But anyway, nevertheless, somebody's grandchildren and parents are gonna have to pay these bills off.